All right, everybody. Welcome to the 392nd edition of the Holy Backboard Podcast. I am Dustin here in Rip City, and I got my man.
Sage, very happy to be back home. Uh, 7 days with the family is kind of rough. So I am ready to talk about the thing that excites me the most about the NBA season thus far, and that is the draft cycle. So Dustin, tell them who we are talking about today.
Up first in the 2025 cycle is Asa Newell, forward out of the University of Georgia, standing 6'10", weighing 205 pounds, 19 years old, will turn 20 on October 5th, from Destin, Florida, but also lived in Athens, Georgia from the ages of 4 to 10. Obviously, that is the home base of the Georgia Bulldogs. Huge recruit for Georgia, five-star by rivals, five-star pretty much on every outlet, the 13th player ranked nationally, the fourth highest signee for the Bulldogs via 247 Sports, trailing number two, Anthony Edwards in 2019, number five, Lou Williams in 2005. Remember, Lou actually just went straight to the pros. He did sign paperwork, but they can still count it, and number 11, Kentavious Caldwell Pope in 2011. Small sample size at there, Georgia, but all of those players turned out to be pretty damn good in the NBA. He is the son of Justin Newell and Carmen Mitchell Newell and is majoring in communications. On the season, Georgia is currently 16 and 10. They are not ranked in either poll, and Ace's stats through February 18th, he fills up a stat sheet: 15.3 points on 56% shooting from the field, 27% from three on 2.5 attempts per night, shoots 76% from the line, pulls down 6.8 rebounds to go along with zero point 0.9 assists, 1.1 blocks, 1.2 steals, has a PER of 27, and does that all in 28.6 minutes of action per night. He is, I believe, a top 15 player on Tankathon right now. I believe he's ninth or 11th on their big board. I didn't write that down. I remember from what I saw last night as I was putting all of these talking points down in my notes. So uh, Portland is slated to pick number nine right now. They're most likely to pick nine or 10 based just upon draft odds. So he is right in that area where the Blazers would be selecting in June. Sage, what are your thoughts on Asa Newell? And do you want to start offensively or defensively first?
I think defensively because it's more complimentary because he's pretty rough on the offensive side. Um, I think that the one thing that keeps him on the floor and will keep him on the floor in the pros is his effort. You see multiple efforts defensively. Like he makes some really smart and good rotations off the ball. And he's one of those bigs that feels comfortable at defending the opposing guy on the perimeter. So I can see him in a Roy Williams scheme really doing well, doing the hard hedge and being aggressive. So like I don't think that he's like perfect defensively, but I think that his effort and his trying hard is the reason why people are seeing him being a potential like defensive guy in the NBA. It's the effort, it's the speed, it's the length. But once there becomes power involved, I think that's where his body looks like it could put on some much needed weight and strength. So when you introduce some strength into the equation, he struggles. He gets pushed under the basket, kind of like Anthony Davis did in Kentucky. Like he just needs to put on strength, and he needs to just be good strength because the speed that he has is such a advantage for how big he is. If he loses any bit of that, it can be scary. But he needs to put on some strength immediately if he wants to be in the high leverage player in the NBA. What do you think about him defensively?
I think the reason he is this high in terms of big boards is scouts see a 6'10" body that moves as fluidly as he does.
I mean, that
And
puts you top 10 regardless because of that.
they see a ball of clay that they would like to now then mold
Hmm.
into the vision that their team, wants and needs. It's it's no different than if you look at the football field and you see, you've got a tall defensive end who can run a 4-3, and if I can just teach him the technique right and
Yeah.
I can, coach him up, that's your all pro edge rusher right there. I think bigs that can move with the fluidity that he can are rare.
Hmm.
I would say he's not an out of this world athlete.
No.
I would say he moves with a
Hmm.
springiness to his step, but I wouldn't consider him bouncy in terms of verticality. Um, I think what keeps him on the floor probably is his ability, his mobility.
Hmm.
You can do a lot of things with a 6'10" player who can move laterally as well as he can. I did notice that he does get uprooted quite a bit, even if it's at
Yeah.
the foul line, like when free throw attempts are being shot, like he can just get uprooted really easily by people going low, using a lower center of gravity, just using more mass. Like he's gonna 205 is a very small frame. So I think
He has that Alex Sars frame right now.
he's definitely a project. And I think any team that drafts him has to be aware of that because it takes time to put on that type of mass that he's going to need to put on while also keeping his his mobility. I would say I don't think he is the thing that concerns me a bit about Asa Newell defensively is I don't know what he can hang his hat on, right? I don't know if he is a dominant rebounder. I don't know if he is a dominant. I know he's not a dominant post defender just because he's not strong enough at the moment. He has his moments where he's blocking shots, but I don't know if I would say he's like a Walker Kessler or
No,
a Donovan
he's good.
Clayman.
He's not great yet.
Yeah, it's
And I don't see him he's not blocking shots from the post. He is going to be a help side shot blocker. He's not doing anything with, Joel Embiid posting him up, Newell's in the first row because of the lack of strength.
and I don't know if he's ever going to be able to put on that type of mass. Like it's really hard when you say like, oh, he just put on some weight. Like skinny players exist in the league, right? Some
Yeah,
players
Evan Mobley and Chet Holmgren are there, bro.
yeah, like Ed Davis was John Henson. Like those two guys were so long and lanky. They just didn't they put
I
on
feel
weight
like you
different
can put
ways.
some weight on him, but I don't know if it's even going to be enough.
Yeah, like there's different ways to wear your weight. So like given that, I think he's actually a four on defense. And I think that causes a little bit of issues team building because as we'll get to on offense, I think he's a five on offense.
Mm-hmm.
And when you're looking at that type of player, that type of tweener really hasn't evolved into being a full-time commodity at the NBA level. Like remember like the Josh Smiths of the world?
Yeah,
He was kind of playing maybe a decade before he should have been playing. Like he was
for sure.
a three who probably should have been playing a four, kind of caught in between. In a small ball positionless era, Josh Smith would have been awesome.
Oh
I
yeah.
don't know if we're there yet for the 4 or 5 tweener like Asa Newell. Um, moving to the offensive side of the ball, here's why I think he's more of a five is he's not going to stretch the floor. His shot is really, really mechanical. Like it just takes him a long time to load it up, and he has to be completely squared to the basket. He needs a long, runway
The runway is incredibly long.
to get that off, and it's not a particularly like consistent shot. As I mentioned, 27% on 2.5 attempts per night at the college line. I would say him shooting 76% at the free throw line is a
Show
good
some touch.
indicator
Hmm.
that it could, you know, uh, become a weapon down the road. But as we've done this for like 5 years now, Sage, it's really easy to say something could happen. The probabilities of it actually happening are much lower than just saying, yeah, yeah, it could happen. Like all he needs to do is become a good shooter, and you can point to like 1 or 2 examples of
Yeah,
that
Pascal
happening.
Siakam and Jaylen Brown's development are the best development stories in the NBA for a reason because it doesn't happen all the time. So I wrote down one note about his shooting. Um, he doesn't miss left or right. He misses if it's too hard or not hard enough. So it's online, but holy crap, he doesn't know the touch yet because I've seen him airball like Kyle Kuzma, but it's online. Like it, he needs to speed it up. He needs to cut down the shot base a lot, but it's online. It's just really the strength is just a it. I don't know how he's shooting 20% from three. Like I just expect everything to miss because of the lack of the right touch. Now, he
Yeah.
does hit the free throws, which makes me feel like he has some form of touch, but when he shoots, it's just like, oh, this is gonna miss. This is
Yeah.
gonna miss.
Theoretical skill sets always give me pause when talking about prospects, especially in the top 10. It
Mhm.
just kind of reminds me as a Blazer fan going back to Zach Collins when you hear the stories of Neil Olshey and Terry Stotts visiting University of Portland to watch Gonzaga play, and they see him block a shot on one end and then hit a transition three on the next end, and they kind of left the building because like, oh, we've got our guy. He can now do this at a consistent level for 82 games when that just never was the case, injuries or not. Like Zach Collins never developed into a consistent 3-point shooter despite having a decent looking shot. Like so when we're talking, theoretical skill sets, it's really a
You have to have
lottery.
with Newell, you have to have so many things go right. He needs to be strong enough. He needs to still keep the flexibility. He needs to,
Have
you know,
touch.
have oh my God, are we gonna talk about his touch? So I have Bartorovic picked up and he's hitting 89% from on dunks, but I still don't know how he like if there's any.
If it's outside of the restricted area, like that semicircle, anytime he shoots
It's
from
Russell Westbrook style misses,
it's just
bro.
it's a complete like he does like I understand the flashes, right? You see him take the ball from the wing, 3-point line extended, and he's dribbling past players. He's
Euro
euroing through.
stepping. He's Euro
He
stepping
can
through
get
him.
there. He has a really nice, spin move where he goes back to his left hand. But then it's like everything stops and he's just throwing up something.
Once contact happens, it's
It's
gonna be bad.
contact or even just the shot process itself. It's just like it's everything stops, like all of the
You
good, and that's what scares me a bit because I don't think touch is necessarily something you can teach. I think you either
no,
have it or you don't. Like look at Jokic. Like you can't tell me that somebody can just go and learn how to do that. You
no.
just have it, in your muscle memory, I have to release the ball at this point, at this trajectory, this much force for it to go in, and it goes in. Like players learn it, I guess. I think they do, but I think it's over just
It's just a
probably
one
a
added
long
thing for
career.
him to do to
Like
be able to be
if you
successful.
if you take Zach Randolph, for example, being undersized, having to always play under the rim,
Mhm.
he had to learn the angles at an early age, right? Like same thing with CJ McCollum as an undersized guard. Asa Newell's never been undersized.
No, he's perfectly sized. He's just weak and his touch kind of sucks. Like, and okay, this might we're talking a lot of negatives, but
I don't feel like I'm being a net. I'm just
oh,
being
I'm
realistic.
about to.
Okay.
I think that he's there's that dichotomy of uh analytical versus watching the games and making he's like the perfect example of you look at the stats and if you even look at the advanced stats, he's good.
His
But if you
stats,
look at
I
him
was copying the format from what I do for my notes, and I had Jabari Smith. That was the first Feature Friday we did. His stats are better than Jabari Smith at Auburn, but the eye test says Jabari was a much superior prospect
yeah,
coming out.
exactly. So most of the people listening to this are probably Blazers fans. So if you see people say how good Newell is at these things, they're not really watching him because okay, I think that he gets most of his stats against the shitty teams that he plays against. So he's had games where it's like amazing statistics against Texas Southern University, where it's just like D2 guys, where he's just so much better than everybody on the court. He just dominates and gets 26 and 15. But then he plays against Marquette and is pretty human. I think that those statistics might be off because of how good he looked against the really bad teams on the schedule, like that he puts 26 and 15 or whatever. Like he's he's a very you see them he's moldable, but right now I don't see
I don't
a
see
guy
a
that has a
player
role
I
in
would
the
be
NBA.
comfortable taking in the lottery.
No, I'm not comfortable taking Newell with our first. If we get a second first round pick and it's later in the first round, I would be totally fine because he is a project. We need some security with our first pick that this guy is going to be good. You have so many issues with Newell, with the touch, with the strength, with everything that he has, that it's kind of tough, man. Like it's really for me, it was really hard to come up with comps for this guy because you see the size, you see the speed, but you don't like he's an okay rebounder. He's doesn't touch he's a okay passer, but he's an awful shooter. There's not that many guys in the league with those skill sets. It's a kind of throwback, and I don't know where he would fit in, especially on a Blazers roster that is devoid of so much shooting. To use a first round pick on a guy that's the worst shooter of the bunch is kind of scary to potentially think about.
I think he reminds me a lot of Marvin Bagley. And I saw Bagley play in person at the Phil Knight Invitational, and even then, Bagley was either an All-American or All-American caliber. Like he put up stats. Like he was
Mhm.
the hub for, a top five Duke team.
Yep.
And even then I was like, he's awesome in college. He's not going to work in the pros. And it's for a lot of the same reasons we're talking about Newell. And Newell, I don't think is near the caliber of the collegiate player that Bagley was. So for me, I would pass. If he had shown a little bit quicker release on the three, if he had more touch around the basket, I would be more open to the idea because I could really see the vision offensively. And I think if the only thing you're asking him to do is to gain weight, I think that's realistic and I think that's doable. But you're now we're asking, okay, you got to get stronger. You have to figure out touch around the rim. You have to get basically a new shot a little bit, speed it up, and you have to
He
be
has
more
to make it like 30% faster to be.
there's so many
Mhm.
things that have to go right. I'm not saying that it can't happen. I'm saying as a Blazer fan with this roster where we're at, I wouldn't take that swing. Like we're not a team like Oklahoma City and Brooklyn that has three first round picks in this draft that can take a couple of swings. Portland, for the most part, they have to kind of hit it at least a double every time because you're getting one shot at this. They likely do not have a second round pick this year, but it's up in the air with Atlanta. There's some weird
Mm.
protections on that. So you kind of have to find a player who has upside, but is also their floor is they can play right now because we have projects on the bench that aren't even getting off the pine. Rand Rupert is a classic example of
Mhm.
that. Like we need guys who can have a ceiling, but their floor is decent. I think the swings in the pendulum are a little bit too far for Asa Newell for my
Eh,
taste.
Do you even trust our development staff to develop him correctly? As like Chauncey Billups and his staff is going to ruin him. And
I mean,
like
I,
even
I
if
think I think they ruin almost every player. I think all our players are good in spite of our coaching staff, but that's just
fair
me. I
enough.
just I just read a story about Scoot Henderson, and it wasn't the Blazers reaching out to a shooting coach for him. Jeremy Grant reached out to his personal shooting coach to come work with Scoot Henderson, and now he is a consultant for the Blazers. But that goes to show you that it was not the Blazers' idea to get Scoot Henderson a shooting coach. It was his own teammate, Jeremy Grant, that's like,
Shout
hey,
out to Jeremy.
I
Shout
think
out
you
to
could help
Jeremy.
him get Coach John Townsend. So I think that question is blanketed with my answer of I think Billups would
And
not have a positive impact on any of our rookies.
with I don't even think he can be a five offensively. Have you tried like he is like you know who he reminds me of? Like remember when I wrote that article about Matisse Thybulle being the offensive big because he's such a bad shooter?
Hmm.
And did you see we were at the game where they tried it for one game and he tried to set screens and failed so spectacularly at trying to set screens for it might have been Dame and it might have been Ant, I don't know, but like he was trying to set screens. That's the same way Newell sets screens. He is not used to having a firm real screen and rolling. I think that the one of the reasons he dunks so well is that they're not in the position. Like if the teams playing Georgia were in the right position, he's not attempting the dunk, and it's gonna just be a miss in the paint because if the runway is clear, he looks awesome dunking, but it's not a very it's a pretty rare time where he actually is free to dunk. And on this team, we're so bad at shooting. We need to have some people that stretch it out. And I just think Newell isn't. But I he needs to get into the lab and practice shooting because I think that's if he can't shoot, I just don't know the role for him in 2025.
Yeah, I think it's a tough fit with Donovan McClingan as your starting center and
And
Tumani
Scoot.
Kamara
Yep.
as your
Yep.
wing. And as much as I love
Denny.
Scoot, is Scoot going to continue this trajectory as a shooter? If so, that eases your mind. But Tumani's still a little hot and cold.
Denny
Um,
is
yeah, Denny definitely is.
scary.
Shaden is hot and cold shooter. Like you just, I think he and Klingon just clash a little bit too much, and I think the realistic chance of Newell hitting his ceiling is a little lower than I would be comfortable with. Like my draft philosophy, it's not black and white. Like I think you have to take your team context into consideration. For Portland, they need shooting. It doesn't mean that's the only identifier you go out and target. Um, I think in general, like you have to look at your team. Do you have a number one alpha dog superstar in your roster? Probably not right now. Maybe you figure that out towards the end of the season. So you probably should be taking best player available. But are they similar in their tiers?
Mm.
Is one player have a higher ceiling, but does the other player have a better chance at reaching their ceiling? Like it's all relative, right? Like we look at players, I think Ace Bailey is going to be a hot topic among Blazer fans this year. I think Ace Bailey is a flawed prospect, but I think the ceiling is nuts. And I
Oh, it's
think
absolutely.
and I
He's a
think there's a
superstar.
realistic chance
Mm,
that he could hit it.
mm.
You look at Patrick Baldwin, who a couple of years ago was a five-star prospect, just really couldn't get it together in college, had quote unquote all the tools. I didn't think that was a realistic ceiling for him to hit. He fell to the late first round, and he's kind of been passed around the league a bit. And for me, it's like, okay, do I kind of view Newell maybe not quite to the extent as PBJ, but I more
I
closer
think
to
Patrick
Zach Collins,
Baldwin's
more closer
significantly
to Zach
better.
Collins, where I don't think that ceiling is going to be actualized, and you're looking closer to the floor or a 50% comp. And that player to me is one, not a player we need, and two, not a player that I think is valuable enough to select in the lottery.
Yeah. I think Patrick Baldwin's a way more skilled player than Newell. I yeah, like when I see him, I'm like, okay, at best he's Kenneth Faried, and I don't know how Kenneth Faried would play in a 2025 team on especially in this on this team. I think like if you go like I would hate to do this to Jarris, but like if he went to Indiana, I think he would do have a much higher chance of succeeding with Miles Turner there, with Tyrese Halliburton, with the coaching staff of the Pacers. I think he has a better chance. I think there are situations where he would succeed. I just firmly believe that it is not in Portland where he would succeed, especially with our roster today.
All right. I think that about wraps this one up. I'm going to be pushing for VJ Edgecombe to be our next Future
Oh yeah,
Friday. So
VJ's at worst 5 on my board. So
I think he's two for me right now. I have some questions, but I think there's a ceiling that could be realized, and if it is, it's
it's a
absolutely
much more likely chance to happen than
yeah. So be on the
we
lookout
have
for
to teach VJ how to dribble, not teach Asa how to kind of play basketball right now.
be on the lookout for that one. Thank you all for listening. Sage, take this home.
And as the we kind of started late in the draft process, so I'll do some complimentary pieces of some second round guys since Dustin has a life. I'll watch the sicko mode basketball for us, so you can get a real in-depth, idea of some of the players. But hey, one of the guys that I talked about who was a second round guy when I talked about him, ended up being a lotto pick, and Devin Carter, my my boyfriend of that draft, because I love that. I love that man. But we are available on iTunes, everywhere where you get your podcast. We are there. Thank you so much for listening to the draft content. I know that some people don't like it as much because you know, it's the Blazers didn't succeed, so we're picking relatively early. So thank you to everybody who is, and thank you, Dustin, for watching some kind of mediocre Georgia basketball. So thank you all. I'm gonna get some lunch. Peace. All right, later, man.